Пресвятая Богородице, помогай нам.
Ridiculous. I am a ridiculous man. They call me mad now, but I no longer mind. I would laugh with them, not at myself, but for love of them, if I did not feel so sad watching them. So sad, because they do not know the truth, and I do. It used to hurt me that I seemed ridiculous. No, not seemed ridiculous, I was ridiculous. I have always been ridiculous since the day I was born. I think I first realized it when I was 7. I went to school and then to the university. The more I studied, the more I realized that I was ridiculous. In the end, all my studies served only to prove and explain to me, the deeper I went, just how ridiculous I was. I was laughed at by everyone, all the time. When I became a young man, though I learned more and more about my terrible affliction, I began to feel more at ease. Perhaps this was because of that awful despair which was taking hold of my soul, the growing conviction that nothing mattered. I had suspected this for a long time, but the absolute certainty came to me suddenly one day last year. I suddenly found that it did not matter to me if the world actually existed, or if there was really nothing at all anywhere. Soon after this, I learned the truth. It was in November, the 3rd of November to be precise, and I have remembered every moment since then. It was a gloomy night, the gloomiest night that ever was. I was going home just before 11 o'clock, and I remember thinking that there could not be a gloomier hour. It had been raining all day, and it was the coldest and gloomiest rain, an ominous rain, a rain manifestly malignant to mankind. Suddenly, at 11 o'clock, the rain stopped, and a horrible dampness set in, a dampness which was even colder and damper than the rain. And everywhere a mist began to rise from every stone in every street and in every side street whenever I peered into their dark chasms, and it suddenly struck me that it would be better if all the lights went out. For to see all this by gaslight was sad, was so sad. As I was thinking about the gaslight, I glanced up at the sky. It was dark, terribly dark, but I could clearly make out the shredded clouds and the endless blackness beyond. Suddenly, I saw a tiny star twinkling in the darkness. I began to stare at it. That star gave me an idea. I decided to kill myself that night. I had decided to do so 2 months before, and poor though I am, I bought an excellent revolver the very same day. But 2 months had passed, and it was still lying in my drawer. My apathy, then, had been so absolute that I yearned for a moment when it would be a little less so in which to do it. Why? I do not know. As I was gazing at the sky, that little girl suddenly grabbed my arm. She must have been about 8 and wore only a poor flimsy dress and a shawl. She was soaked to the skin, but what I remember particularly is her shoes. Split and sodden. I remember them even now. I noticed them particularly. She suddenly began to pull at my sleeve and to cry out, "Mummy! Mummy!" I turned my head briefly, but said nothing and walked on. She ran after me, crying out, and in her voice was that sound which in badly frightened children means despair. I know that sound. Though her words were broken, I understood that somewhere her mother lay dying, or something had happened to them, and she had run out to fetch someone or something to help her mother. But I did not go with her. On the contrary, I suddenly felt the urge to drive her away. I stamped my foot and raised my voice, but she just cried out, "Sir, sir," and then she suddenly left me and ran across the street. Another man appeared. She had run from me to him. I climbed the stairs to the 5th floor. My room is small and dingy, with one attic window which is semicircular. The furniture consists of a cloth-covered sofa, a table for my books, 2 chairs, and an armchair. A very, very ancient armchair, but at least it is an armchair. I sat down, lit a candle, and began to think. I took out my revolver and placed it before me. I knew for certain that I would shoot myself that night, but how much longer I would remain seated by the table, I did not know. And surely I would have shot myself, but for that little girl. You see, although nothing mattered to me, I had felt shame earlier that evening. Surely I should have helped a child? Why then did I not help that little girl? It was because of an idea that came to me. While she was pulling at my sleeve and crying out, a question suddenly occurred to me, and I was unable to answer it. Since I had already decided to end it all that night, Nothing at all should have mattered to me in the slightest. Why, then, did I suddenly feel that something did matter to me, and I pitied the little girl? I remember that I pitied her so much that I even felt a strange and, in my situation, incongruous pain. I really cannot describe it any better, that fleeting feeling of mine, but its memory remained with me even when I was at home seated in my chair, and it irritated me more than anything had done for a long time. Given the absolute certainty that I would soon utterly cease to exist, and so nothing would exist, how come I still felt pity for the little girl and shame for my vile action? The question was idle and pointless, since my revolver was already lying in front of me, and yet I no longer seemed able to die until I had answered it. In a word, that little girl saved my life, because the unsolved question made me put off the act. And then suddenly I fell asleep. In my armchair by the table, a thing which had never happened to me before. I fell asleep quite without realizing it. They tease me now that it was only a dream. Well, let it be but a dream. But the fact remains that I was going to extinguish my life. But my dream, oh, my dream gave to me a new life, a life renewed, glorious, and strong. Listen. I picked up my revolver and pointed it at my heart. My heart, and not my head, and I had firmly decided to shoot myself through the head, through the right temple to be precise. With the revolver pointed at my heart, I waited a moment or two, and suddenly my candle, the table, and the wall in front of me began to sway. I quickly pulled the trigger. I felt no pain, but at the sound of the report my whole being seemed to be shaken up, and everything went dark, horribly dark. And now I was being carried in a closed coffin. I could feel the coffin swaying, and was reflecting upon it when the thought struck me for the first time. I was dead. Quite dead. And now I was being placed in the earth. Everyone left, and I was alone. Utterly alone. I do not know how long I lay there. An hour, a day, or several days. Suddenly, a drop of water which had seeped through the lid of the coffin fell on my closed left eye. A minute later there was another drop, and after another minute a third, and so on. One drop every minute. Indignation suddenly flared in my heart, and I cried out, not with my voice, but with my whole being, to the ruler of everything that was happening to me, "Whosoever thou art, if thou art, and if there does exist any greater intelligence, then let it show itself here also. But if thou art taking vengeance upon me, punishing me for my foolish suicide with the shame and absurdity of life eternal, then know that no amount of torture could possibly compare with the contempt I shall always feel, in silence, even through millions of years of martyrdom." Deep silence lasted for 1 full minute. Then another drop fell. But I knew, with infinite and unshakable certainty, that now everything would be changed. And suddenly my grave was opened, and I was lifted up by a strange being and swept away deep, deep into space. Already we were far, far from the earth, when all at once I saw a tiny star twinkling in the darkness, and I cried out, "Is it Sirius?" "No," said the being. "It is the star you saw between the clouds as you were going home." "You know that I am afraid of you, and therefore you despise me." There was no answer, but instantly I knew that I was not despised. I was not being laughed at or even pitied. I knew that our flight through space had an unknown and mysterious purpose, a purpose which concerned me alone. And suddenly I saw our sun. It could not be our sun, but this was a sun exactly like our own, a double of it, its twin. "But if that is the sun," I cried, "then where is the earth?" And my companion pointed to a star sparkling like an emerald in the darkness. We were heading straight towards it. "Is it really so? Can that be an earth like ours?" A vision of the little girl flashed through my mind. "You shall see everything," my companion said, and in his words I sensed a hint of sadness. And suddenly I was upon that other earth, in the brilliance of a sunny day, as beautiful as paradise. Oh, everything was exactly the same as on our earth, but it all glowed in glorious celebration of a great and sacred triumph finally achieved. A gentle emerald sea caressed the shores with a love that was almost visible, and the grass was ablaze with bright and fragrant flowers, and beautiful tall trees stood in flowering magnificence, and I am sure their numberless leaves welcomed me with their soft and gentle rustling, as if they were whispering to me words of love. And flights of birds alighted my arms and shoulders, beating me joyfully with their tremulous wings. And then I saw the people of this joyous land. They came to me themselves, surrounded me, and kissed me. Oh, children of the sun, of their own sun, how beautiful they were! Never have I seen such beauty in man on our earth. Only in our children, in their very first years, could one perhaps detect a very faint glimmer of this beauty. The eyes of these happy people shone with a clear light, and their faces glowed with wisdom and tranquillity, and yet they were also full of laughter. Oh, the moment I saw their faces, I understood everything. Here was a world without sin. These people had not sinned. They lived in a paradise, just like the one in which our ancestors once lived, so the legends of all mankind tell, before they knew sin. Laughing joyfully, they crowded round me and caressed me. They led me away, and each one wanted to comfort me. They asked me nothing, but seemed to know everything, and only wanted to drive the suffering quickly from my face. Well, let it be but a dream. But the love of those beautiful and innocent people will remain with me always. Even now I can feel their love flowing to me from their world. I saw them with my own eyes, and came to know them and to love them, and afterwards... Instantly I knew that I would never understand them completely in many things. For instance, it puzzled me that, knowing so much, they did not possess our science. But I soon understood that their knowledge was greater than our science, for our science seeks to explain life in order to teach others how to live, while they knew how to live without science. They showed their trees to me, and I could only watch as they gazed at them with the deepest love. It was as if they were speaking to beings like themselves, and, you know, I may not be wrong if I say that they did speak to them. Yes, they had found their language, and I am sure the trees understood them. It was so with all nature. The animals who lived in peace with them, loving them and never attacking them, but captivated by the people's love for them. They wandered their beautiful groves and forests, and sang their beautiful songs. They ate the most delicate of foods, the fruit of their trees, and the honey of their woods, and the milk of the beasts that loved them. They made love and bore children, but never did I detect in them any sign of that savage sensuality which grips almost everyone on our earth, every single one, and is the root of almost all sin among man on our earth. They knew neither quarrels nor jealousy, and did not even understand the meaning of these words. In the evenings, before they slept, they would sing, their voices blending in perfect harmony. They loved to sing songs praising one another, the simplest of songs, but coming from the heart, they touched other hearts. Others of their songs were solemn and exultant, and I hardly understood them at all. Though I knew the words, I could not understand their meaning, yet somehow I appreciated them all the more in my heart. They tease me now, and say, It is impossible to dream in so much detail. I must have made some of it up after I awoke. And when I said that perhaps that was so, oh, how they laughed in my face! What amusement I provided them! But how could I doubt the truth of my words? It was perhaps 1,000 times better, far brighter and more joyful than I can tell. Well, let it be but a dream. But all this must have been. And I shall tell you a secret. It may not have been a dream at all. For something happened. Something so true, so horribly real, that it could not possibly have been the mere figment of a dream. My heart conceived that dream, but surely my poor empty heart and my wretched mind could never have conceived that awful reality. Judge for yourselves. I have concealed the truth until now, but now I shall reveal this truth as well. The fact is that I corrupted them all. Yes, I corrupted them all, like a deadly virus, like an atom of plague infecting whole nations. So I contaminated all that happy land, sinless before my coming. They learned to lie, and to love lying, and to know the beauty of lies, and to live a lie. Oh, maybe it began innocently, in jest, in loving playfulness, but soon this atom of lying seeped into their hearts, and they warmed to it. Soon after, sensuality was born, and sensuality begat jealousy, and jealousy begat cruelty, and, I don't remember, but soon, very soon, the first blood was shed. They were amazed and horrified, and began to separate and go different ways. Reproaches and recriminations began. They came to know shame, and the idea of honour was born. They formed alliances, but were allied only in opposition to one another, and each alliance had its own emblem, and conflicts arose over sovereignty and division, the inalienable rights of individuals, and thine and mine. They came to know suffering, and to love sorrow, and said that only through suffering could truth be attained. And then science was born. When they became evil, they began to talk of brotherhood and humanity. When they became criminal, they invented the idea of justice, and in order to maintain it, compiled whole codes of law, and to protect the law, they constructed a guillotine. They hardly remembered what they had lost, and refused to believe that once they had been so innocent and happy. The idea that they could once have been so made them laugh, and they called it a dream. But when they had lost all faith in their former happiness, calling it a myth, a fairy tale, their desire to be happy and innocent once again became so great that they built temples to it and began to pray to the image of their own desire, all the time believing it to be impossible, and yet adoring it and worshipping it with their tears. And if it had been possible for someone to show them a glimpse of the paradise they had lost, and to ask, "Do you wish to return?" Do you? Do you wish to return? They would probably have kept silent. Deceitful, evil, and unjust we may be, but we know this. We don't need you to tell us. And we weep for it, and torment ourselves, and punish ourselves more severely perhaps than will the merciful judge who is to come, and whose name we do not know. But we possess science, and through her we shall find the truth once again. Knowledge is greater than feeling, and knowledge of life is greater than life. Science will give us wisdom. Wisdom will reveal the laws, and knowledge of the laws of happiness is greater than happiness. This is what they told me. And after speaking thus, each loved themselves above all others, nor could they do otherwise. There were the saintly ones, who came to these people with tears and spoke to them of their pride, of their arrogance, of their loss of all measure and harmony, of their shamelessness. But these righteous ones were mocked and stoned. Holy blood was spilt on the thresholds of the temples. Others appeared who conceived how to unite everyone once again, but with each one continuing to love himself above all others, and yet none standing in the way of any other, so that all might live together once more in communal harmony. Just wars were fought because of ideas like these, each side firmly believing that science, wisdom, and the instinct of self-preservation would eventually force mankind to unite into one harmonious and civilized community of nations, and in the meantime, in order to speed matters up, the wise attempted to exterminate the unwise as quickly as possible, so that they should not impede the idea's triumph. At last, the people were worn out with their senseless toil, and their faces became twisted with suffering, and they proclaimed that suffering was beauty, for in suffering alone lay wisdom. They celebrated suffering in their songs. I walked among them, weeping for them. It was I who caused their fall, I alone. I begged them to crucify me, and I showed them how to make the cross. I had not the strength to kill myself, but I longed to suffer at their hands. I longed for my blood to be drained to the last drop in suffering. But they just laughed at me, and came to regard me as a saintly fool. At last they declared that I was becoming dangerous, and they would lock me in the madhouse if I did not keep silent. At this, my heart was filled with despair, and I felt that I was dying. And then I awoke. It was already morning, or rather, Day had not yet dawned, but it was almost 6 o'clock. I awoke in my armchair by the table. The candle had burnt out, and silence reigned all around. Suddenly, I saw my revolver lying in front of me, ready and loaded. I pushed it away. No! Give me life now. Life, yes, I want to live and to spread the word. That is why I came here. To tell you. To tell you the truth that I have seen. That we can be beautiful and innocent and happy on this earth. I cannot, I will not believe that evil is the natural condition of man, and yet it is just this belief of mine that makes them all laugh at me. But how could I not believe it? I have seen the truth, seen it with my own eyes, and its living image has taken hold of my soul forever. I may stray from the path from time to time, I may even use the words of others, but not for long. The living image of what I have seen will remain with me always, guiding me. Do you know, at first, I wanted to conceal the fact that I corrupted them all. But that would have been lying. Truth whispered to me that I was lying. Truth saved me and showed me the way. And the mockers say, "It was only a dream, a delirious vision, a hallucination." Ha! Are they just so clever, so arrogant? A dream, they say, only a dream. But what is a dream? Is not our whole life nothing but a dream? I shall go further. Granted that all this will never be, that paradise will never come. After all, I do realize that. I shall still go forth and speak the truth, even for 1,000 years. It is all so simple. In a single day, in a single hour, it could all be achieved. The thing is to love others as one loves oneself. That is all. Nothing more is needed. It is just an old truth, read and repeated millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of times, and yet never understood. Knowledge is greater than feeling, and knowledge of life is greater than life, and knowledge of the laws of happiness is greater than happiness. This is what we must fight against. and I shall. If only everyone wanted it, it would all come about in a moment. And that little girl, I have found her. And I shall go. Yes, I shall go.